The first time Ambassador Elias Raines stood before the Zyrrak High Council, he could feel the weight of their scrutiny pressing down on him like the artificial gravity of a heavy world station. The chamber was vast, shaped like an inverted pyramid, with tiered levels rising high above the floor where he stood. Thousands of alien delegates observed him, some with open curiosity, others with thinly veiled contempt. Raines adjusted his collar. The air smelled faintly of ozone, a byproduct of the Dominion's advanced environmental controls. He had prepared for this moment for years, studying their laws, their customs, even their grudges. He had argued, pleaded, and convinced Earth's united coalition to take this unprecedented step. Humanity would not come as conquerors or as subjects, but as mediators, something the Zyrrak Dominion had never known before. The humans present themselves as neutral. One of the Zyrrak counselors rumbled from a high podium. The Zyrrak were tall, reptilian beings with scaled crests running from their foreheads down to their backs. Counselor Zyrrak was the most influential of them, a leader who had seen centuries of war. Yet neutrality is weakness. You have no stake in our conflicts. Why should we trust you? The room fell silent, all eyes on Raines. He took a slow breath, choosing his words carefully. Because neutrality is not weakness, he said, his voice calm but firm. It is strength, the ability to see beyond faction, beyond blood, feuds, and grudges. Humanity offers what you do not have, an outside perspective that can prevent unnecessary war. There were murmurs among the council. Some delegates leaned in, intrigued. Others narrowed their eyes. Raines continued, sensing the opportunity. You fight wars of pride, of vengeance, of territory, and yet your enemies remain, growing stronger with every battle. How many more centuries will you waste before you realize that war is not the only path? A ripple of uncertainty ran through the chamber. The Dominion thrived on conflict, yet war had become an endless cycle. The Aro clans had fought the Valkyries for over 100 years over a system rich in titanium deposits, and yet neither side had gained an advantage. The Zyrrak had spent decades crushing uprisings, only for new ones to rise in their place. Counselor Zyrrak studied him for a long moment. You claim to bring peace. Prove it. The first test came swiftly. Within a month of their arrival, humanity was thrust into one of the Dominion's bloodiest conflicts, a dispute over the mining rights of the Uzra Belt, a sector rich in rare minerals. The Zyrrak had claimed the resources, but the native Tarshek, an insectoid species adapted to the belt's extreme conditions, refused to submit. The Tarshek had never been a serious military threat, but they had learned to weaponize the asteroid fields, launching devastating hit-and-run attacks that made it impossible for the Dominion to secure the sector. Previous Zyrrak strategies had focused on brute force, bombing Tarshek colonies into submission. It had never worked. Raines proposed something different. Sitting at a long negotiation table aboard a neutral station, he met with both Zyrrak and Tarshek representatives. The room was tense, the air thick with unspoken threats. You want the minerals, Raines said, looking at the Zyrrak commander. They want to survive, he said, turning to the Tarshek diplomat. And neither of you are getting what you want. The Zyrrak commander scowled. They refuse our rule. The Tarshek diplomat hissed. You would strip our home bare. Then there's no deal, Raines said simply, standing. And the war will continue. Another 100 years of wasted ships, wasted resources, wasted lives. Or, he let the word hang in the air. We try something different, a shared governance agreement. The Zyrrak would get their mining rights, but the Tarshek would oversee the extraction to ensure sustainability, benefiting from a share of the profits. Independent regulators, chosen by a neutral third party, in this case, humanity, would oversee disputes. At first, both sides resisted, but the logic was undeniable. War was costly. Peace was profitable. After weeks of negotiations, the deal was signed. For the first time in Zyrrak history, a conflict had been resolved without bloodshed. One victory led to another. Humanity proved its worth again and again. Conflicts that had lasted generations began to be resolved. Trade flourished. New diplomatic channels opened. The Dominion, long defined by its warlike nature, found itself changing in ways it had never expected. Not everyone was pleased. In the shadows of Dominion politics, powerful warlords and ruling elites whispered of humanity's growing influence. The Dominion had always thrived on control, on dominance. But the humans, they were different. They didn't seek conquest, yet they reshaped everything. They were the first species in history to make the Dominion compromise. That made them dangerous. Counselor Zyrrak watched the changes with an unreadable expression. He had been the first to doubt them. Now, he was the first to warn of the consequences. They are not warriors, one of his advisors scoffed. They will not challenge us. Zyrrak's golden eyes narrowed. Not today, but they're shaping our empire to their design. If we allow this to continue, one day, we will wake up to an empire we no longer recognize. And when that day comes, the humans will not need weapons to conquer us. They will already have one. The seeds of betrayal had been planted. The question was not if they would sprout, but when. The message came at dawn. Ambassador Elias Raines had just settled into his office aboard the diplomatic station Horizon when the emergency communique arrived. The Dominion's High Council had called for an immediate hearing, an unprecedented summons. Even before reading the details, Raines sensed something was wrong. He scanned the encrypted message. The wording was sharp, accusatory. Humanity had been formally accused of espionage, political manipulation, and the orchestration of secret military operations against the Dominion. The charges were absurd, but the implications were clear. This wasn't a request for clarification. It was a trap. Raines' assistant, a sharp-eyed analyst named Nadia Kovac, read over his shoulder and swore under her breath. "This isn't just an accusation," she said, voice tight. "They're moving against us." Raines exhaled, running a hand through his graying hair. For years, humanity had worked tirelessly to mediate peace, resolve conflicts, and integrate into the Dominion's political framework. They had no military power here, no fleet, no warships, only diplomacy. And now, that diplomacy was being turned against them. The High Council chamber was packed, far more than usual. Delegates from every major faction had gathered, some whispering amongst themselves, others openly glaring at Raines as he stood in the center of the chamber. At the highest tier sat the Zyrrak elite, their expressions cold. Counselor Zyrrak, who had once given humanity a chance, now watched in silence. Raines could not tell if there was regret in his reptilian eyes. A Dominion magistrate rose. His voice, deep and guttural, echoed through the chamber. The humans stand accused of subversion and dishonor. A hollow display flared to life above the chamber, showing distorted video footage, grainy clips of supposed human operatives bribing officials, manipulating elections, even arming insurgents. Raines recognized the technique immediately. The footage had been doctored, spliced together from various diplomatic meetings, and altered to fit a damning narrative. "This is a fabrication," Raines said evenly, keeping his voice controlled. "Humanity has always acted in accordance with the treaties we signed. We've worked to prevent war, not cause it." A murmur of dissent rippled through the chamber. The Dominion magistrate's eyes gleamed. And yet, the magistrate continued. "We have intercepted secret communications between human envoys and known insurgents. We have discovered human-made weapons in rebel stockpiles. We have found evidence of your kind plotting against the stability of this empire." Another hollow image flashed, a shipment of weapons with human manufacturing codes, seemingly seized from a rebel outpost. Raines' stomach twisted. He knew for a fact that Earth had never supplied arms to any faction. Someone had gone to great lengths to set them up. Raines turned to Counselor Zyrrak, trying to read him. "You know this isn't true. You've seen the results of our work. The peace we've built together." Zyrrak's expression remained neutral. "It is not me you must convince, Ambassador. It is them." He gestured to the thousands of Dominion delegates, their opinions already poisoned by the evidence before them. A rising chorus of voices shouted in alien tongues. Some demanded expulsion, others execution. Raines fought to control his breathing. The trial had been nothing but theater, a display of power before the inevitable verdict. The magistrate turned back to him. "Humanity has betrayed the trust of the Dominion. The punishment is exile." effective immediately. A final declaration, followed by a unanimous vote. The decision was made before Raines had even stepped into the chamber. The betrayal was complete. Within hours, chaos erupted. Humanity's embassies across Dominion space were raided. Diplomatic envoys were arrested or forced to flee. The once respected human negotiators became outcasts overnight, hunted by the very species they had worked to protect. On Horizon, Raines and his team scrambled to send messages back to Earth, warning them of what had happened. The station's security had already been compromised. Dominion enforcers were inbound, and they wouldn't be gentle. "We have to leave now," Nadia urged, pulling up a star chart. "The closest relay gate to Sol is being locked down. If we don't get through in the next hour, we're stranded." Raines clenched his jaw. Years of work, erased in a single day. "Send the final message to the United Coalition. Tell them the Dominion has turned against us. And tell them," he hesitated, "tell them we will not forget this." The station rocked as Zyrrak enforcers breached the lower levels. "Move!" Raines and his team sprinted to the docking bay, boarding a diplomatic shuttle. As the airlock sealed, Raines took one last look at the Dominion station that had once been a beacon of peace. Now it was just another battlefield. As the shuttle burst into hyperspace, heading for the uncertain future that awaited humanity, Raines made a silent vow. The Dominion had made a mistake, and one day they would pay for it. The void of space had never felt so suffocating. From his seat in the cramped diplomatic shuttle, Ambassador Elias Raines watched the flickering starfield blur through the viewport. Behind him, the remnants of humanity's diplomatic corps sat in silence, shell-shocked, exhausted, betrayed. For years, they had been the architects of peace, the guiding voice in an empire that thrived on war. Now they were fugitives. The jump to the Sol system would take days, and the message they had sent ahead carried grim urgency. Humanity has been exiled. The Dominion has turned against us. Prepare for the worst. Nadia Kovac, sitting across from him, was reviewing star charts on her hollow pad, her eyes dark with worry. "We barely got out," she muttered. "Half our people were arrested before they could escape. Some didn't even make it to their ships." Raines closed his eyes, guilt washing over him. So many lives destroyed. And for what? Because humanity had dared to bring peace to a war-driven empire? "They planned this for years," he said finally. "Every piece of evidence was manufactured. Every alliance we built was systematically undermined." His fingers curled into a fist. "And we never saw it coming." Kovac set the pad down and leaned forward. "So what do we do now?" For the first time in his career, Raines had no immediate answer. When the shuttle finally entered Sol's orbit, they were met with silence. No escorts, no welcoming delegation, just the vast blue sphere of Earth spinning below them. "Where the hell is our response team?" Kovac muttered. As they neared the orbital station, the answer became clear. The station was running at skeleton crew levels. The military fleet, what little Earth had maintained after decades of de-escalation, was scattered across different postings. Humanity had no real defenses. They had never needed them. The Dominion had allowed them to believe they were allies. Earth had trusted them. Now, that trust had left the homeworld vulnerable. The moment Raines stepped off the shuttle and into the halls of the United Coalition's command center, he saw the fear in the faces of the officials waiting for him. Admiral Juno Voss, one of the last remaining military leaders with real combat experience, was already pacing. "The Dominion has cut all trade," she reported, her voice tight with anger. "Our colonies in the outer systems are being blockaded. They haven't fired on us yet, but we're completely isolated." Raines felt a cold weight settle in his chest. "And Earth's defenses?" Voss gave a humorless chuckle. "We spent the last 30 years dismantling our war fleet in the name of diplomacy. We have outdated planetary defenses, a handful of patrol ships, and some repurposed freighters. If the Dominion decides to strike, we won't last a week." A grim silence followed. The dream of peaceful coexistence had left humanity naked before the storm. "They won't attack yet," Raines said finally. "Not until they've rewritten history. They'll want to make sure the rest of the galaxy sees us as traitors before they finish us off." Kovac exhaled sharply. "So what do we do?" Appeal to the Galactic Council? Call for a hearing? Raines shook his head. No, no one will listen. We're already branded as criminals. He straightened. We don't beg. We survive. In the following months, Earth's leaders scrambled to prepare. The Dominion had underestimated one thing: human resilience. They had no fleet, so they built one in secret. Old ships were refitted, hidden in asteroid belts, or disguised as civilian freighters. Shipyards on Mars and Titan worked around the clock, constructing vessels that weren't designed for open war, but for something far more dangerous: covert operations. They had no allies, so they found them in the shadows. The same species the Dominion had crushed over the years. The rebels, the outcasts, the war-weary, became fertile ground for human influence. Smugglers, defectors, and dissidents were recruited into a growing underground network. And they had no army, so they became ghosts. Humanity could not win a war of firepower, but they could win a war of deception, of sabotage, of carefully placed strikes that would fracture the Dominion from within. Raines, once the voice of peace, now became something else entirely. A strategist in a war fought not with fleets, but with whispers and well-placed blades. The first major strike came 2 years later. A Zyrrak-controlled mining station in neutral space was suddenly overrun, not by an invading fleet, but by a coordinated cyber attack. The station's shields dropped, its security systems crashed, and within minutes, a combined force of human operatives and rebel fighters had taken control. The Dominion blamed pirates, but those who knew better whispered the truth. Humanity had returned. Raines stood in a dimly lit war room, staring at a hollow map of Dominion space. The Empire was vast, but it was not unbreakable. Not if the right fractures were widened. He turned to his allies, former diplomats, exiled leaders, resistance fighters from species once crushed under the Dominion's rule. They wanted to erase us, he said quietly. They wanted to break us. A slow smile spread across his face. They have no idea what they've unleashed. The war did not begin with grand battles or fleet engagements. It began with whispers. Humanity, cast out and dishonored, did not strike back with brute force. They could not yet, but they had learned from the Dominion. They had studied its strengths, memorized its weaknesses, and most importantly, they had seen the rot beneath its gleaming facade. So they did what they had always done best. They outmaneuvered their enemy. Elias Raines sat in the dimly lit command hub of Horizon's Edge, a deep space station that had once been an abandoned mining platform. Now it was something else entirely, a hidden nerve center for the growing rebellion. Before him, a dozen representatives of various exiled factions stood around a glowing holomap of Dominion space. Some were human, others not. There was Keth Vero, a former Valkyris admiral who had defected when the Dominion betrayed his people. There was Soren Koss, a Tarshek strategist whose homeworld had been stripped bare for resources. And there was Lyrian Thal, a high-ranking information broker from a species whose name the Dominion had erased from history. This isn't just about revenge, Raines began, his voice calm but edged with purpose. The Dominion is crumbling. Their wars are bleeding them dry. Their supply lines are stretched. Their factions are at each other's throats. He leaned forward, tapping a blinking sector on the holomap. What they don't realize is that we're going to push them over the edge. The first phase of their plan was simple: make the Dominion fight itself. Human agents, disguised as Dominion operatives, began seeding false intelligence. A Zyrrak governor was fed forged documents implicating a rival house in a coup attempt. A supply convoy meant for a Dominion war fleet was mysteriously rerouted to a system controlled by a separatist faction. Key Dominion officials were assassinated in ways that suggested betrayal from within. Each move was designed to deepen the paranoia already festering within the Empire. And it worked. Within months, the Dominion was spending more resources hunting phantom threats within its own ranks than dealing with the growing insurgency. Loyalists turned on each other. Accusations flew like laser fire. Trust eroded. Meanwhile, humanity and its allies gathered strength in the shadows. Not every species in the Dominion was loyal. Many were subjugated, humiliated, forced to serve an empire that had crushed them under its heel. So humanity gave them something the Dominion never had: hope. Covert teams infiltrated Zyrrak-occupied worlds, spreading messages of rebellion. Underground networks provided weapons and resources to enslaved species who had long thought resistance was futile. Entire colonies, once subjugated, began to rise in secret. Keth Vero, the exiled Valkyris admiral, took a sip of his drink as he watched footage from a Dominion-controlled world on his personal datapad. A mining colony had just revolted. Dominion security forces overwhelmed, workers storming supply depots, Zyrrak banners being torn down. Vero grinned. "It's happening," he said. "They're finally realizing they don't have to bow anymore." Raines nodded but remained cautious. One revolt won't break the Dominion. But 100? 1,000? That's how we win. The rebellion's first real test came on Korak Prime, a strategically vital planet known for its massive shipyards. If the Dominion lost it, their ability to reinforce their fleets would be crippled. Raines and his strategists knew a direct assault was impossible. The planet was too well defended. But they also knew the shipyard workers, the very people who built the Dominion's warships, hated their overlords. So they sparked an uprising from within. Sabotage teams disabled planetary defenses from inside. Workers went on strike, grinding ship production to a halt. And when the Dominion sent a fleet to suppress the rebellion, humanity's allies struck from the shadows, raiding supply depots, disrupting communications, turning what should have been a simple pacification mission into a logistical nightmare. Within weeks, Korak Prime was lost to the Dominion. It was their first major defeat, and the galaxy noticed. The Dominion was furious. They launched brutal crackdowns on suspected rebel worlds, executing entire populations to make an example of them. They placed massive bounties on human leaders, sending assassins and bounty hunters across the stars. Raines himself survived 3 assassination attempts in the span of a month. Others were not so lucky. "They're getting desperate," Lyrian Thal noted, reviewing intercepted Dominion transmissions. "They still think this is an insurgency they can stamp out. They don't realize they're fighting something much bigger." The rebellion had grown beyond humanity. It had become a movement. As the Dominion flailed, humanity and its allies prepared for the next step. No longer would they simply weaken the empire from within. Now, they would take the war to the Dominion itself. The time for whispers was over. The time for war had begun. The Dominion still believed they were fighting a scattered insurgency, an annoyance to be dealt with through terror and overwhelming force. They did not realize that the insurgency had evolved into something far more dangerous, a coordinated revolution. It was time to prove it to them. Elias Raines stood before the rebellion's war council aboard Horizon's Edge, their hidden command station. The room was filled with leaders of various species, some once bitter enemies, now bound by necessity. A massive hollow map of Dominion space flickered before them. "We need a target that will send a message," Raines said, scanning the room. "Something that will shake their confidence, disrupt their command structure, and show the galaxy that the Dominion is not invincible." Soren Koss, the Tarshek strategist, folded his many arms. "The Zyrrak homeworld is too well defended, and we don't yet have the fleet strength for an open battle. We won't win this war by storming their capital," Keth Vero added. "Not yet." Lyrian Thal, the information broker, flicked her wrist, and the holomap zoomed in on a star system near the Dominion's core. "Here," she said. "Valkyris Prime." A murmur ran through the room. Valkyris Prime was a key military stronghold, one of the Dominion's most fortified star bases, home to its primary logistics network. But it wasn't just a military asset. It was a symbol. If it fell, the Dominion's enemies would know that they were no longer alone. Raines studied the data, then nodded. "We take Valkyris Prime, and the entire sector destabilizes." The plan was built on deception. They couldn't outgun the Dominion fleet stationed there, but they could outmaneuver them. Phase 1, a fake distress call from a Dominion convoy, luring the Valkyris fleet away. Phase 2, a cyber attack disabling planetary defenses from within. Phase 3, a lightning-fast strike by a mixed force of human-led rebels and defectors, overwhelming the remaining defenses before reinforcements could arrive. It was bold, risky, but if it worked, it would be the first major blow against the Dominion's grip on the galaxy. The moment the Valkyris fleet left orbit to investigate the fake distress call, the rebellion struck. A wave of cyber warfare crashed through the Dominion systems. Security feeds looped false images, defensive platforms turned offline, and critical infrastructure went dark. Then the assault began. Human stealth ships emerged from the asteroid belt, launching precision strikes against remaining defenses. Rebel strike teams, already embedded inside the station, detonated key targets, fuel depots, munition stockpiles, command centers. Within hours, Valkyris Prime was in chaos. Dominion troops fought back viciously, but they were unprepared for an attack of this scale. They had never imagined that the scattered insurgency could coordinate a full-scale military operation. And then came the final blow. From hyperspace, defected Dominion warships, commandeered by former captains who had turned against their own empire, arrived and opened fire on their former comrades. The betrayal shattered what remained of the Dominion's resistance. By the time the Valkyris fleet realized the distress call had been a ruse, it was too late. Valkyris Prime had fallen. Rebel banners were raised over the shattered stronghold. And for the first time in history, a Dominion military hub was no longer under its control. Across the galaxy, the message was clear. The rebellion was not just a nuisance. It was a force to be reckoned with. The Zyrrak High Council was silent as the reports came in. Valkyris Prime gone. Their own ships used against them. Their enemies, no longer cowering in the shadows, but striking at the heart of their empire. The Dominion's leaders, once so confident in their control, now faced a terrifying truth. Humanity was no longer playing by the rules, and they were just getting started. The fall of Valkyris Prime sent shockwaves through the Dominion, reverberating across every corner of their vast empire. The once unassailable fortress, a symbol of Zyrrak military superiority, was now a smoldering ruin. News of its collapse spread like wildfire, and for the first time in centuries, the Dominion's enemies began to believe they could win. But for Elias Raines and the rebellion, Valkyris Prime was just the beginning. On Horizon's edge, Raines stood before the War Council once again, the mood somber but hopeful. The victory at Valkyris Prime had been a decisive blow to the Dominion, but it had come at a cost. Rebels had died. Ships had been lost. We've shown them that we can strike when and where we choose, Raines said, his voice steady but weighed with the responsibility of the task ahead. Now, we need to consolidate our gains. The rebellion's war effort was fractured. Despite their victories, they were still an insurgency scattered across the galaxy, with no clear supply lines or unified military command. Some factions were beginning to question whether the revolution could truly succeed. Keth Vero, the Valkyris admiral, was the first to speak. Our forces are still too small. We've struck hard, but now we need reinforcements. More ships, more troops, more supplies. The Dominion will retaliate in force. They've already begun mobilizing. Soren Koss nodded grimly. Valkyris was a significant victory, yes, but they won't let it go unpunished. We've given them a rallying cry, and the Zyrrak don't forgive easily. The rebel leaders were right. The Dominion was massive, and a single loss, no matter how significant, wouldn't be enough to topple it. But Raines had a plan. We've already got the support of hundreds of colonies and systems on the brink of rebellion, Raines said, spreading a star chart on the table. Now it's time to open the floodgates. We got to hit them everywhere: logistical hubs, supply lines, communications networks. We cripple their ability to respond, to communicate, to defend themselves. And we do it in a way that makes them question their empire. Days after the fall of Valkyris Prime, the Dominion launched a retaliatory strike that sent fleets into rebel-controlled space. They didn't hold back. They had to make an example of the insurgents. Their first target, Horizon's Edge. It was the heart of the rebellion's operations, and the Zyrrak believed it would be an easy kill. They sent a fleet of warships to annihilate it, thinking they could end the rebellion with a single blow. Raines and his team had prepared for this. They knew the Dominion would react violently, and they had planned accordingly. Horizon's Edge was not just a station, it was a trap. The rebel fleets that had been scattered across various sectors now converged there, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The space around the station was a labyrinth of debris and asteroids, perfect for ambush. As the Dominion fleet entered the system, their ships were pulled into the carefully laid web of traps. Hidden mines detonated, fighter ships launched from concealed hangars, and the station's defense platforms, previously thought to be deactivated, came online with brutal precision. The Dominion fleet was caught off guard. In a matter of hours, several of their warships were crippled or destroyed, forcing the remaining ships to retreat. Once again, the rebellion had struck back. But this time, they hadn't just defeated a few ships. They had repelled an entire fleet. News of the battle spread quickly, and the ripple effect was immediate. Rebel fleets in other sectors launched simultaneous strikes against Dominion assets, attacking supply convoys, infrastructure hubs, and communication relays. The Dominion struggled to coordinate their response, and in their confusion, more systems began to rise up. On the galactic stage, the perception of the Dominion began to shift. The empire that had once been seen as invincible was now in retreat. One by one, species that had once been silenced by fear began to see hope. The Heroic clans, who had long been rivals to the Zyrrak, sent emissaries to meet with the rebellion. The Valterii, a race of peaceful telepoths subjugated by the Dominion's greed, pledged their support. Even former Zyrrak loyalists began to question the empire they had fought for. However, the Dominion was not going to fall without a fight. Behind the scenes, the High Council moved to consolidate their power. Counselor Zyrrak, once a vocal skeptic of humanity's peaceful influence, now found himself at the center of the Dominion's war machine. He had grown wary of the rebellion's momentum and understood the only way to stop it was to destroy the human-led resistance from within. He pulled together a secret task force, specialized in counterintelligence, sabotage, and assassinations, to infiltrate the rebellion's ranks. The goal was clear: divide and conquer. The rebellion's greatest strength was its unity among diverse species. But if they could fracture that unity, the entire movement would collapse. Zyrrak's agents began their work. They sowed distrust between the different factions, planting false information that made the rebellion's leaders question each other's loyalties. They offered bribes, made threats, and used psychological warfare to turn allies against one another. The stakes were higher than ever. As the Dominion struck back with covert operations of its own, Raines and his team had to deal with new challenges. The fear that the rebellion's internal divisions might soon be their undoing. Raines stood alone in the command center of Horizon's Edge, watching as the latest reports came in. The rebellion had won several battles, but their unity was starting to crack. Factions were turning against one another, questioning decisions, accusing each other of betrayal. The sabotage had begun to take root. He slammed his fist against the console. "We can't afford this now." Kovac, always a voice of reason, placed a hand on his shoulder. "We have to expose them. We need to find the ones pulling the strings from the shadows before they tear us apart." Raines nodded. "They've underestimated us. We will find them before they find us." The fight was far from over. But now, more than ever, Elias Raines understood the true nature of the battle ahead. It wasn't just about winning battles in space or claiming victories on the ground. It was about winning the war for hearts and minds. And to do that, they would have to confront the enemy within their own ranks. The war was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the soul of the galaxy. The rebellion had come a long way since that first covert strike on Valkyries Prime. What began as a fragmented insurgency, filled with disparate groups of oppressed species and human exiles, had slowly transformed into a formidable force capable of challenging the very heart of the Dominion. The enemy had underestimated them at every turn, but now the tables were beginning to turn. The last few months have been a whirlwind of tactical victories, but the real battle, one of subterfuge, alliances, and betrayal, was unfolding behind closed doors. Elias Raines stood at the precipice of something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. A revolution was not won with victory on the battlefield alone. It was won through sacrifice, strategy, and unity. And unity had begun to fray. Raines paced through the war room aboard Horizon's edge, his mind racing. The sabotage within their ranks had taken a toll. Rebel cells were increasingly fractured by distrust. Former allies were pointing fingers at one another, and the Dominion had begun exploiting these divisions with terrifying efficiency. It had all started with the rumors of human betrayal, rumors planted by the Dominion's covert agents. False intelligence was dropped into the hands of high-ranking rebel leaders, sowing doubt about humanity's loyalty to the cause. Was this revolution truly the collective effort of all species? Or was it simply a Trojan horse for humanity to carve out its own empire from the ashes of the Dominion? Raines couldn't blame them for questioning. He'd been questioning, too, the weight of the choices they had made bearing down on him. How far could they push the line of rebellion without losing themselves to the very same hunger for power they sought to overthrow? "Raines," came Nadia Kovac's voice from behind him. She was pale, her face drawn, but her eyes sharp. "We've intercepted a transmission. It's from Zyrrak's task force. They've infiltrated the core of the rebellion." Raines turned sharply. "How deep?" "The sabotage is widespread," Kovac replied, laying down a series of encrypted reports on the table. "They've turned some of our best strategists. There's even talk of some of our fleets defecting. If we don't act quickly, this rebellion could collapse from within." Raines exhaled, his mind racing through countless possibilities. They had to stop this before it spread even further. But who could they trust now? It felt as if the walls were closing in. He glanced at the hollow map, now dotted with rebel strongholds. Some were growing in size, but others were weakening. The unity that had bound the rebellion was slipping away, and if they couldn't regain control soon, it would all fall apart. "We need to expose Zyrrak's agents before they expose us," Raines said grimly. "And we need to do it fast." Raines knew that the war could not wait any longer. If the rebellion were to survive, they needed to hit the Dominion in a way that would shatter their remaining resolve. This would be the final push. There could be no turning back after this. His plan was as risky as it was audacious, a strike directly against the Zyrrak homeworld itself. If they could take the capital, the seat of the High Council, the Dominion's leadership would crumble. It would be a symbolic blow, one that no amount of propaganda could hide. But the Zyrrak homeworld was a fortress, heavily fortified and swarming with the remnants of the Dominion's fleet. It would take everything they had to break through. "We can't do this alone," Raines said, addressing the War Council. "We need the full strength of every faction that's been rising against the Dominion. The Valkyries, the Oroch, the Valterii, every one of them. This is our last chance." Keth Vero, his face scarred from years of war, nodded. "The fleets are ready, but they'll have to work together. If we fail, we're finished. The Dominion will crush us before we can regroup." Soren Koss stepped forward, his insectoid eyes gleaming. "Then we will not fail. The Dominion has underestimated us at every turn. Now, we show them the true power of the rebellion." Raines looked around the room at the leaders of the rebellion, each with their own history, their own people, their own battles. This was no longer just about revenge, it was about hope. And if they could take the fight to the heart of the Dominion, they could finally destroy the system that had crushed so many lives for so long. The assault on Zyrrak Prime was a stunning, coordinated effort. Rebel fleets, unified under the banner of freedom, rushed toward the homeworld. The first wave was designed to distract, to draw out the Dominion defenses. The second wave, the true strike force, came in from a series of unpredictable angles, exploiting weaknesses in the Dominion's carefully laid defense grid. As Raines watched the battle unfold from the bridge of the command ship, Revenant, the stakes had never been clearer. If they failed, the rebellion would end here, with the Dominion crushing them underfoot. But if they succeeded, it would mark the end of the Empire's centuries-long reign. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Dominion retaliated with every weapon at their disposal. Massive ships of war, shockwaves of plasma fire, and swarms of fighter craft. But the rebellion was faster, more nimble. They had learned from their earlier battles, adapted, and now, their coordinated strike was too much for the Dominion to handle. As the final wave of assault ships broke through the last of the Dominion's defensive shields, Raines' voice rang out over the comms. Now, strike at the heart of their capital. It was the turning point. With precise attacks on the Zyrrak High Council's command center, the rebellion destabilized the Dominion's leadership. Within hours, the High Council was decimated. The last of the Dominion's leaders, including Zyrrak, were either killed in battle or forced to flee into exile. With the fall of the Dominion's capital, the Empire crumbled like a house of cards. Without its leadership, without its unifying force, the Dominion's territories fell one by one into the hands of the rebellion. Planets that had once been crushed under the heel of tyranny now tasted freedom. Raines stood on the bridge of Revenant, looking out at the stars. The galaxy was changing, and humanity was at the center of that change. No longer outcasts or exiles, they had become the architects of a new order, a galaxy built not on domination, but on unity. "We've won," Kovac said softly, standing beside him. Raines nodded, but his eyes remained distant. "We've won the war, but the peace will be harder to build." The rebellion had succeeded. The Dominion was no more. But the real work was just beginning. The galaxy needed healing, and it would not be an easy task. Old wounds had to be mended, new alliances forged, and perhaps, for the first time in history, peace could become a reality. As the stars twinkled in the vast expanse of space, Raines knew that humanity's journey was far from over. They had broken the Empire. Now they would rebuild the galaxy. Together.